just within the last few minutes, Judge Juan Marchand, who is overseeing the criminal trial in New York State Court that begins April 15th, has put a gag order on Donald Trump because this morning, as you can see, I'm holding it up here on Truth Social, Donald Trump threatened the judge, and more importantly, he threatened the judge's daughter.
Wow.
And several judges have put Trump on notice that, you can say whatever you want about me, but you do not go after court staff, you do not go after witnesses, you do not go after our families. And in this morning, after saying the whole state thing is a Joe Biden operation, which is absurd, Biden has nothing to do with it, it's a state, not federal case. He says without naming him, that Alan Weisselberger, his longtime finance guy, is being pressured to say bad things about Donald, bad things that are untrue. And if he doesn't do it, he's going to get 15 years in jail. And accuses the judge of a Trump derangement syndrome. And he says his daughter is a senior executive at a super liberal Democrat law firm, that works for Adam Shifty Schiff, the Democratic National Committee, the Dem Senate majority, and even crooked Joe Biden. And that got Donald Trump a gag order. And remember, if you're out on bail, and Donald Trump is out on bail in several cases, you are not a free citizen. You are free only so long as you follow the rules of the court. And I think Trump is lucky after this one, frankly, that he wasn't thrown in jail.
Wow. That's extraordinary. It's such a low rent smear too. He's so low rent in his.
I mean, the
cannot stop himself.
Here is he just can't stop himself because he doesn't have any of the limits and guideposts that the rest of us have.
And he's gotten away with it for so long. That is big news. So this is the gag order that were he to post something like that, or even like 50% of the toxicity of that post, if you were to post it again, David, you're saying it could really, they would they'd jail him.
Oh, I think that without question, the judge has made it very clear this is the last straw, the last time you cross the line. And so if he puts up another thing that takes, brings up not the judge, I don't think the judge will act about himself. By the way, the judge in this case, the criminal case that about to go to trial in New York State Court, the civil case in New York Court, the federal case in Washington, and the Georgia case, all of those judges and prosecutors are under police protection. They get picked up by detectives, driven to and from work. They have cop cars outside their homes because of Donald's comments. And of course, Donald will say, I never told anybody to go hurt anybody. And my answer to that is, the chairman of ExxonMobil has never pumped gasoline either.
Wow, that's a great retort. Yeah. So, David, the other thing I want to add, first of all, we have some questions for you waiting, because today with David Cay Johnston, if there are viewers or listeners who have questions, please throw them into the chat and we'll try to get them to David right away. Make them succinct if you can. We'll get to the point, and they can be a comment or a question. But I did want to ask you about what happened between your last visit and this visit, something that you had sort of anticipated as a possibility, and that is that there might be a reduction in the bond number for Donald Trump. And he was even given an extension on the amount of time he has to come up with the money. So
the reason you post a bond is to, until appeals are completed, prevent the seizure of your assets. If you lose a building and it gets resold to somebody, you can't get it back unless they want to sell it back to you. A bond is not punitive. That's a fundamental important concept. It is not punitive. It is to guarantee payment. So the court in this case reduced the bond to half of the underlying disgorgement Trump has to make. It was $353 million. The court rounded to 175 and ignored the interest. And that's is not that unusual. I mean, you go back 42 years, I think, to the fight between Pennzoil and Texaco, or these two big oil companies. And the bond in that case would have been in the billions of dollars, and the court only made it, I think, 5 or 10% of the total amount. And in the end, everything got negotiated and worked out. Trump's buildings aren't going anywhere. And the interest continues to mount at the rate of about $87,000 a day. It is not cumulative, by the way. You don't get interest on the interest. The interest is just on the base amount. Nonetheless, $87,000 a day. Wow. You go a year and you're talking now in seven figures.
So he has 10 days to come up with the money, and he now, it seems, will likely come up with the bond, the whole amount.
I think so. He says he will. Now, this is very different than what his lawyers represented to Judge Engoron. They said it was impossible to do this. They said it in open court. They said it in caper filings. And once again, Donald Trump has just gone off and said what he said. What we probably will find, I can't say probably, what we may well find out happened here is Donald Trump in August of 2020, as president, issued an executive order banning TikTok and a second Chinese app. He called them a threat. A judge threw that out because, of course, the president can't do that. You can't restrain somebody's First Amendment rights unilaterally. Trump continued to attack TikTok. Then early in March, he met a Philadelphia man named Peter Yass, who is an actual billionaire. He's worth $25 billion. Trump says he only met him for a few minutes, but he met him. And that person, Peter Yass, is the biggest single donor to Republican candidates and causes in the United States. And he owns 7% of ByteDance, the parent of TikTok. That's what made him, in fact, most of his $25 million fortune was from buying ByteDance stock when it was really cheap. And all of a sudden, Donald is now in favor of TikTok. He doesn't want to ban TikTok. Now, his argument is, well, it's because of Facebook and other social media, but those were still the same issues in the summer of 2022. And in my view, what this shows very clearly is how Donald's policies are for sale. Do what I want, put money in my pocket, and I'll give you what you want. And that's not how the law is supposed to work. It's not how our government is supposed to work. And so I expect we will find out that just as Trump had to effectively borrow money from Chubb, the Swiss insurance company, to post the $83 million bond in the E. Jean Carroll second defamation case, that if Trump puts up this money, it will somehow be connected to Peter Yass. There is one other way for Trump to do this. He can't sell his stock in the company with the stock ticker DJT, and it's gone up more than 40% just today. So if he could sell it all at the current price, he would get over $5 billion. But he can't sell it for 6 months. And the directors are all either appointees of his or family members. If they were to waive the requirement and let him sell the stock and it tanks, as is almost certain to happen, they'd all be sued by shareholders, and it wouldn't be a hard case to make. Just for people who don't know, Donald's company had revenues of less than $5 million last year and lost $49 million, but it's being valued by the market right now at over $8 billion.
Well, we talked about this last hour. I'm so glad you mentioned this, David, because I was saying that this really feels like a pump and dump operation, although I don't know who's going to dump it. I mean, I don't know because the dumper won't be Trump.
So here's what Trump can do. He can go to someone like Peter Yass, who has a big financial firm, and pledge his shares to him. He owns 58% of the company. And let's assume the market price at this moment is $5 billion. And Peter Yass might say, well, okay, I'll loan you $3 billion against that. You can't make any withdrawals that I don't approve of beyond the first maybe $500 million, what he needs to cover the damages. And then Peter Yass would go, or someone like him, and short the stock, that is, sell shares they don't own. Then when the stock collapses, they replace the shares they have to replace from Donald's account, and they make money either way. If the other side of these deals are, if the stock goes up further, typically the person on the financial side of this gives you the first 35% increase. So $1 billion stock, they loan you hundreds of millions. If the stock goes up, when it hits 1.35 billion, you start making money again. If it falls to zero, they've shorted the stock. I'm reminded here of the movie Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and I can't remember Murphy's first name.
Eddie Murphy, sure.
Eddie Murphy, thank you.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in which the two of them are addressing, or Eddie Murphy is addressing Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici, who are these commodities traders, and they explain to him that whether the price of oranges or anything else goes up or down, they make money. And Eddie Murphy goes, "Oh, I gets it. Use bookies." And that's
Right.
what Wall Street does. Wall Street is set up. They make, money. Stocks go up, stocks go down. They make money both ways. So
But the
it
way,
is possible Donald could do this. It is absolutely legal, and there is no requirement under the securities laws that he disclose it. There may be under election laws. I don't know about that. But under securities laws, totally legal deal done by lots of Silicon Valley people. So there were a lot of people who bought money in a Silicon Valley operation and said, "Oh, well, great businessman X has his whole fortune in this company. If he thinks it's solid, then I'm going to put money in it," not knowing that actually that person no longer had any financial interest in the company because they had gotten cashed out legally without telling anyone.
wow. Wow.
I've failed in my efforts to get Congress of the SEC to address that and rewrite the law.
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly a huge loophole in the law. Here's a question for you, David Cay Johnston. Again, if you have anything, Kim, Mark asked David Cay Johnston about Trump Tower Chicago and Deutsche Bank for giving of $250 million due from that project.
Yeah, it's DCJ, Kim.
Yeah,
But,
it is DCJ.
not DCJ, DCJ. Pronounced K, but it's spelled C-A-Y.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right amount of money. Trump had a $40 million loan. He tried to get out of it when the market collapsed in 2008, calling it an act of God or force majeure, the legal phrase. And he lost on that, but he was able to beat back Deutsche Bank to some degree on the interest. But Donald has a whole life history of borrowing money and not paying things back. And the total he's borrowed and not paid back is well north of $1 billion.
The point made here from Chris from Menlo Park, David Cay Johnston, Trump got his New York judgment reduced by 60% by the New York Appellate Court. How can they say with a straight face that all people are treated equally before the law? Other folks wouldn't get that.
Yeah, well, Chris, that's not what happened. The judgment for the persistent fraud is unchanged. If Donald loses on appeal, he will still owe $353 million and interest at 9% on the various dates the judgment applies to. Right now, with interest, he's pushing around $460 million. And by the way, I said earlier, 7 figures, it's 8. If you pay $87,000 a day, you're north of $20 million, close to $30 million a year, not a single million. So what the court did is lowered the money he has to post to prevent foreclosure. That's not a reduction. Now, he could, from the state court of appeal, get a reduction. The court could look at the case and say, we looked at the judge's math and we think that it's not what we think is right. And instead of 353 million, they could come back and say it'll be 310 or some number like that. But there's nothing that suggests in the record, as I've read it, and many other people I've appeared on TV with or I've talked with who are lawyers who practice in this area, that would result in overturning the decision.
This is interesting about Kushner, the implication from Vilma. Trump's son-in-law has $2 billion, David, from the Saudis. Right. That's who Trump should look to. I think
that his son-in-law and his daughter have been doing their very best to separate themselves from Donald. They've snubbed him in public. She managed to get out of the persistent fraud case. And I think they intend to do everything they can to stay away from Daddy and stay away from whatever follows, because they want to go on and have a life without being pariahs, that's the risk that they're running.
And that
they
is the
very
price
rich
they
for
paid.
life.
They paid a huge reputational price for being in that White
Yeah,
House. And yeah,
right.
it's a really good point. This is from Lori. Makes me want to buy a share just to be able to be part of a lawsuit when the inevitable shady trade happens.
Have at it.
Yeah.
Understand something. Donald's company, $5 million of revenue. That's not profits. It lost $49 million last year, at least. And it's been bid up to $8 billion. I mean, there's irrational exuberance, and then this is completely crazy.
Well, here is the point I was making. I was kind of alluding to GameStop last hour, and here you go from Wes. Truth Social stock will be like GameStop stock in a couple of weeks. I don't know if that's true, David, but you're right. It's being held up by people who are just buying into Trump, his brand, in effect.
Yeah, I don't know when the stock exuberance will come to an end, but if it hasn't come to an end by the night of November 5th, that is when the markets open on November 6th, if Donald loses, it'll collapse immediately. If he doesn't get back to the White House, it will collapse. And Donald has tried in his surrogates to compare Truth Social to TikTok. There's no comparison at all. Donald posts screeds there. TikTok is full of, frankly, very interesting stuff. A lot of salacious, crappy stuff, but it's got, cat videos, which a lot of people like, and they're a good way to clear your mind, and all sorts of other things. People doing extraordinary acrobatic things like break dancers used to do on the sidewalk in San Francisco and New York and LA. And there's nothing like that on Truth Social. And there's no ad base for Truth Social of any consequence. So, I could be proven wrong, but I'm really not concerned that that's going to happen.
The one thing I would say, it's interesting, David, and I wanted a quote from your piece, which I really like. Again, it's in the New Republican. We will have a link to it because it just sort of speaks to the crescendo that is this moment in Trump's life. But part of that crescendo, it seems, David, is that he's taken his brand, which is this brand of grievance and anger and, us versus them. And, it seems so basic and crude. And yet he's created it to the point that I think some of this Truth Social thing is, as you sort of noted, enthusiasm for Trump. It's like they want to send money somewhere where it gets to him.
We don't know who's buying this stock. We do know there are people saying on the internet, I'm supporting Donald by buying this stock. It could be, and I want to be very clear, I'm blue skying here. But for all we know, it could be MBS who's having people buy the stock, or Putin. The Securities and Exchange Commission can and will know if it wants to, because all of these trades are recorded. But of course, they would only then know who the nominal buyer is, not who put up the money in the background. If the stock collapses, one of the stories you're going to see after it does is all sorts of people who said, well, I don't have very much money, but I put all my savings into this stock to support Donald, and now I'm going to lose my trailer home.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I see that big time, and you saw it in the election when Latinos voted for Trump, and then members of their family ended up on deportation lists. It was crazy. Those stories were everywhere. I saw something that I didn't get a kick out of.
Math. Thank you.
Yeah.
Elwood Kelp. I knew it was around
Kelp. Fix your map. 87,000 a day is 31.7 million, not 26 million.
Thank you very much.
That's it. Yeah, welcome. We have. I'm being kept honest every day on this show, and it's scary. Cecilia Rose.
When I was a child, my mother used to trot me out in front of people and have me multiply 4 digits by 4 digits. And I remember the day I couldn't do it anymore. And I thought, boy, I'm a lot happier.
Yeah, no more parlor tricks for this kid. David, I love the way most days you wear sweatshirts or T-shirts on Mark's show, and then you clean up when you're on CNN.
Actually, I was trying to get Syracuse orange. This is as close as I've got, except for my orange Dickie, which is in the wash.
Really, really great. Well, I wonder, David, if some of the the entities that are wanting to curry favor with Trump might rescue him a bit on this Truth Social thing. I don't know.
I mean, Jeffrey Yass has a real clear financial interest in Donald Trump. He owns 7% of ByteDance. That is most of his $25 billion fortune, or a very large share of it. And if TikTok is banned or it's sold for anything less than what I'm sure is an extraordinarily profitable future, he would be harmed. And so he has every reason in the world to help Donald Trump on reasonably favorable terms to Trump. Yeah, there you got an image up of Mr. Yaz.
Yeah.
Gambling. Yes, right.
Right. Well, I'm sure that he can gamble at another level. Those I played cards with a couple of those big deep pocket guys, and they're on a different level for sure. But you outline, and then I'll let you go here. You're so kind to give us time. But the fortune, when he announced his second run for president 9 years ago, he ran briefly in 2000. Trump told us over and over he was worth more than $10 billion. He said he was so rich that he could spend $600 million of his own money on the 2016 campaign. And he said he wouldn't need to solicit donations. That, he said, assured the American people that he was not the servant of donors slurping up tax dollars from the federal trough. Now he's a beggar, you say. And while the small donors won't have any power over him, anyone who comes up with 9 figures of cash certainly will. And now, David, you've put some specifics on that. You know, the actual people who will come up with that cash. It is bizarre that he ran quite credibly on I'm the rich guy. It was like a Ross Perot thing, you know. I'm rich enough that I won't be beholden to any of these interests. And then in the end, of course, it's pay to play with his hotel and other ways to, you know, line his pockets.
And if people read that story at the New Republic, and I hope they do, they will see there's 2 cinematic references to Donald that I think lay out pretty well the reality of the situation. But Donald just always makes this stuff up. And a principle of Donald's is that if he says it, that makes it so. And if you don't buy his version of events, even if he contradicted himself 30 seconds later, fake news. The problem is you. And Donald put almost none of his own money into the campaign in 2016. He relied on donors. Of course, he relied on donors. And he's doing it now. I mean, he literally does. You can find on the internet where he makes an appeal to people. Can you send $5, 10, maybe even 25? And there's some meme out today. I got a couple of pictures from people that, you know, show some poor guy in falling apart clothes next to his wife and her duster and the 4 little kids running around a rundown trailer covered with rust. You know, about giving their money to Donald. I don't have money for a lot of things, but I give my money to Donald. And it is astonishing that people will do that. On the other hand, you know, we had a preacher I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, who said, I need a bigger jet. God wants me to have this jet and show pictures of it. And I need $54 million to buy this private jet. And people gave him the money. So, you know, you can do what you want with your money. It's your money, but you do have to wonder about the sensibility or lack thereof of a lot of Americans.
It is really a great column. And as David says, there are a couple of great cinematic references that just are laid out so well. There it is. Today is the day that 50 years of grifting finally comes to an end. Unless Donald Trump comes up with $454 million, now, of course, as you know, that number's been reduced, he's in deep doo-doo. But will his backers ever wake up to reality? You state it so well. It's really... There's almost an elegance to your column, and we'll have a link to it in this video and on this show. Hey, David, thank you so much. We love seeing you everywhere, and most of all here, and we look forward to the next time.
Talk to you next week.
Okay, David Cay Johnston, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.